and the Turrbal people north of the Brisbane River and all the way out to the Pine River. So when I acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, it is to say that I am a visitor here. This is not my traditional land. Just as we're all visitors just passing through. But I want to say welcome to everybody who is here today and others that are maybe online. Welcome to Meanjin, because Meanjin is the Aboriginal name for Brisbane, where Brisbane is actually situated. I also want to pay my respects to our elders both past, present and emerging. I always acknowledge elders of all cultures because we have so many other people who now come to this land, bring their families here and now call this place home. I also must acknowledge sorry business. And when we acknowledge sorry business, that is not only just for our family members that may have passed, but for all people. And this is globally, because we know what is happening with COVID-19, and we know that COVID-19 doesn't discriminate. So for all of those people who may have sorry business, I also want to extend my condolences to you. As I said, I am a Gungari descendant. So the reason why we do this, I'm not from this particular area. I'm a Gungari descendant on my father's side, and I come from a place called Mitchell in southwest Queensland. But my traditional lands extend north to Carnarvon Gorge, east to Roma, west to a small place called Morven, but that's towards Charleville, and south to St George. So that is Gungari country on my father's side. On my mother's side, my people are Bidjara, and they come from around the Charleville area. But my mother was stolen generation, and so we don't always know exactly where her people are from, but we know that she was from around that area. I'm also proud of my other cultural heritage, which is Chinese on my father's side and Afghani on my mother's side. So multicultural, I suppose you could call it. Thank you to Mental Health Foundation Australia for inviting me here today to do the welcome and acknowledgement of country. I want to say thank you to Pushpa for the invitation to come here and join with you today. And I have been working, I suppose, on the sideline with mental health for the last couple of years. But I know that this is Mental Health Awareness Month, where we can all come together and share information that will be helpful to a lot of our people, all people across the country. And I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. Thank you very much, and welcome to all of the participants. And I do want to make a special acknowledgement of the guest speakers today. Thank you.
Auntie Peggy's too quick for me, but Auntie Peggy, we've got a certificate of participation to thank you for your time, so thank you for being here. That's really lovely. Do you want a photo? Yeah, of course, let's do that. No, we were just saying before that unless there's a photo and it's on social media, it didn't happen, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome so much. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here today and for your participation in this symposium. It's a pleasure and an honour to be here. It's even more nice to be in a room surrounded by real people and not on a TV screen and Zoom. So, welcome. My name is Jay Fraser, and I'm the founder of Little Scholars School of Early Learning. So, as an educator and as an owner of early education and care services in Queensland, it's a real privilege to be here today to host this event and be your MC today. I also think it's really exciting to be able to have this conversation, certainly in person, but given what we've experienced as humans over the last 18 months, dealing with mental health is an issue for everyone. But more importantly, our early education and care workforce, who are showing up every day and acknowledged by the federal government as really being the heroes of what's happening right now, because we showed up every day and they took care of all of those incredible children while the other heroes were able to continue to keep our communities safe. So it's an incredible opportunity, and I'm really privileged to be here today. So Kira Lee and Susan, thank you for the opportunity. So on behalf of the Mental Health Foundation Australia, its patrons, Board of Directors and Chairperson, Mr. Fasan Srinivasan, I would like to welcome you all to this major National Mental Health Month event, the Childcare and Mental Health Symposium. Welcome also to those joining us online virtually. It's great to have you here. So National Mental Health Month is an initiative of the Mental Health Foundation Australia, MHFA, to advocate for and raise awareness of Australian mental health as a community. The MHFA's National Mental Health Month is unlike many other mental health awareness campaigns. It also has many, many words to say. It aims to bring all Australians together in a nationwide conversation about mental health, and we aim to maintain this conversation for an entire month and beyond through a series of events. National Mental Health is a program that the MHFA is extremely proud of, and we intend to reach out to and educate as many Australians as possible to help reduce stigma and facilitate positive and non-judgmental discussion surrounding mental health, and how timely that is. With 1 in 5 Australians experiencing a mental health illness each year, it is time we give mental health due attention. Throughout this month, many events have been organised in each state and territory of Australia, aiming to attract and unite Australians of all ages and backgrounds to raise awareness of the need for better mental health for all. This year, the theme of National Mental Health Month is Post-Pandemic Recovery, Challenges and Resilience. And this year's theme will focus on raising awareness about mental health in various industries and various communities. Every individual in this room, online and all around Australia has faced, and many are still facing, unprecedented challenges due to the COVID-19 pandemic. With this theme in mind, we aim to extend our campaign even wider than previous years, with events planned to embrace many different community groups and people of all ages walking on the road to recovery and fostering resilience. #resilience and recovery. 2 pretty strong words. In Queensland, we are holding a mental health appeal on the 10th and a walk for mental health on Sunday the 17th. And later in the month, we have a sport and mental health forum, followed by the Defence and Mental Health Symposium. Today's forum, which we are delighted to have you here to join us with, is focusing on the mental health of the early childhood education and care workforce, and how the mental health of those workers and educators affects caregiving and the education quality. With greater knowledge comes the power to enhance outcomes for educators, the children in their care, and by extension, even their families. I would like to advise you as a courtesy that we are live streaming today's event and also recording it for distribution in part or in full at a later date. A reminder to also please wear your masks. Good reminder, Jay. When eating and drinking, obviously, you don't need to wear them, and when you're seated. So thank you, and please join us by celebrating the Mental Health Foundation Australian journey by viewing a short video.
Hi everyone, I'm Vasan Srinivasan, Chairperson of the Mental Health Foundation Australia. It's a privilege to lead this wonderful community-based mental health organisation in its 91st year of establishment. The MHFA has grown strength to strength over the past few years. With Victorian Mental Health Month in 2018, the National Mental Health Month occurring in 2019, 2020 and this year in 2021. Last year, COVID-19 did not stop us from achieving our National Mental Health Month campaign. I'm proud to say we successfully shifted many events to a virtual platform, very much being able to pursue our objectives of raising awareness and advocating for better Australian mental health. Our primary aim is to reach out to and educate as many Australians as possible, to help reduce stigma and to encourage constructive and non-judgmental dialogue on Australia's critical mental health issue. The highlight of last year's campaign was reaching out to 100,000 Australians all across the country for our National Walks for Mental Health, both virtually through our MHFA app and physically in some states. What a grand success that was. In 2021, with pandemic still affecting many of us, we decided not to give up once again, curating a carefully chosen blend of virtual and physical events for Australians to participate in. This year, we have a new and improved MHFA app, giving people the opportunity to participate in National Mental Health Month from the palms of their hands. This year, theme is Mental Health and Post-Pandemic Recovery Challenges and Resilience. Mental Health Foundation Australia is proud to partner with Australian technology business DB Results and take up the wellbeing app Am I OK? to support our members, enabling individuals to regularly check in on a private and secure platform and ask the question, Am I OK? Am I OK also alerts the user when it's time to seek outside help. We thank DB Results for this opportunity to promote well-being and early intervention. This year, we have launched a special initiative, the Mental Health Appeal on the 10th of October, our World Mental Health Day. Through this, we aim to raise funds for the development of a course promoting life and safety in young people. At the MHFA, we pride ourselves in making sure all our programs are for the community and powered by the community. We have a vast growing network of multicultural ambassadors, youth ambassadors and future leaders who further the community voice in promoting mental health and well-being. Our multicultural network has inspired our educational and multicultural webinars as an initiative to assist individuals cope with success during the pandemic. I would like to take this moment to thank our board directors and patrons, scientific advisory committee members, our wonderful staff, multicultural and youth ambassadors, future leaders, MHFA members and major sponsors for their continuous support to our organisation as we continue to work to deepen understanding of the importance of mental well-being and educating the community. Let's work in solidarity for the benefit of our mental health. Thank you, Australia.
What an, round of applause, I agree. A credible organisation and a foundation helping. I do just want to mention as well that we have had a slight change to the agenda. We were having an opening address from Terry Young, however he is running late. So we're just going to move that to after morning tea. In case you think that I'm a terrible MC and have stuffed up the agenda, that's not my fault. I think you all agree, a round of applause for the work that MHFA is doing is really, really special. And we were also just talking before about, whilst there's a lot of negatives surrounding COVID pandemic and the impacts that's having on people's mental health, I think events like this and the conversation talking about what we can do is really important. And so with that said, I'd like to invite Kiralee Dutton to the stage. Kiralee is the Director of the Mental Health Foundation Australia. In recent years, Kiralee has made a strong commitment to helping others and building stronger communities. Her primary area of focus has been issues related to the mental health and wellbeing of working families, children and education preparedness, and employees from a non-English speaking background. Thank you for organising today, Kiralee, and welcome to the stage.
Okay, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Sorry, I just need to get my notes up. On behalf of the Mental Health Foundation, I'd like to welcome you all to the Childcare and Mental Health Symposium. A big thank you too to the presenters and panel members. Presenting today are Terry Young, who is the Federal MP for Longman, who'll be joining us a little bit later. Kelly Dixon, somebody with lived experience of mental health struggles who started on the floor and is now in a childcare management role. Christopher Phoenix of Phoenix Support for Educators. And we will also be joined by panel members, our MC, Jay Fraser, who you've met already, Alison Lamb, Mick Peckick. Are we going with Mick or are we going with Michael? I always go with Mick, sorry. And Josie Suban. I'll share more details about each of our illustrious panel members as we get closer to the discussion. These last 2 years have been unlike anything anyone could have imagined, with COVID-19 bringing many new norms such as social distancing, working from home, quarantining and so on. The MHFA has made sure the pandemic situation does not compromise our national mental health campaign. We have organised various virtual and physical events on many different aspects related to mental health. This year, our theme for National Mental Health Month is Post-Pandemic Recovery, Challenges and Resilience. And what a relevant theme this is, considering the impact the pandemic has had and continues to have on all Australians. In Queensland this year, our planned October events include the Mental Health Appeal on the 10th of October, the Walk for Mental Health in the City Botanical Gardens on the 17th, the Sport and Mental Health Forum on the 21st, and the Mental Health and Defence Symposium on the 28th of October. There is also a gala dinner to wrap up the month on the 30th. I would encourage you all to participate in each and all of these events and join us in our mission of advocating for and raising awareness of mental health. To facilitate the task of running all these different events, in Australia, 2018, the Foundation implemented our Australian Multicultural Ambassadors and Australian Youth Ambassadors programs, comprising a dedicated network of volunteers across the country. The aim was to reduce the stigma associated with mental health issues within culturally and linguistically diverse communities and generally within the Australian community. It's with great pride I can say we have a network of over 300 ambassadors now across the country, and I would like to thank our Queensland ambassadors for their support over the years. As an approved provider, a mother and a member of the MHFA board, mental health in childcare is a passion project for me. The mental health issues faced by parents, children and educators are intrinsically linked, and the additional mental health challenges created by the COVID pandemic are unprecedented. That's a word we seem to hear a lot lately, isn't it? I am excited and honoured to be part of today's symposium, and I'm confident it'll be an integral part of expanding the conversation around mental health in childcare, and I look forward to the MHFA being an agent of change in this space. I would like to thank our patrons, board directors, scientific advisory committee members, multicultural ambassadors, youth ambassadors, future leaders, volunteers and the general well-wishers of the Foundation for their contribution towards organising all the events within this National Mental Health Month awareness campaign. Thank you in particular to Susan and Pushpa behind you for organising this event today. There has been a lot of challenges going on behind the scenes in terms of yesterday's COVID restrictions and tomorrow's COVID restrictions, and the fact that Susan actually lives across the border and the technology involved in taking these events to people virtually. So congratulations and thank you to both of you. You've done an amazing job. Once again, thank you all for joining us today. With your support, we can achieve many great things regarding the reduction of mental health issues and the stigma that shadows them. Thank you.
I always talk about that walk from the chair to the stage as the walk of shame. When we did when we did the ACA National Conference not long ago, it was a very long walk because the organisers put the lectern at the wrong end of the stage. So the speakers had to walk a very long way with everyone just staring at them because the applause didn't go for long enough. This is much shorter today. Thanks so much, Kira Lee, and again, thank you for your effort and your work in this incredible space. It's really, really, really nice. So we will jump now to our keynote address from Kelly Dixon, which is going to be pre-recorded. Kelly is a Queenslander, or was a Queenslander, and most recently just moved to New South Wales, so couldn't be here today, obviously due to the restrictions that are in place. So I'm proud to introduce Kelly. Kelly has over 15 years experience working in early childhood education and care service, with a focus in the more recent years on quality, compliance and child protection. Kelly has spent many years managing childcare centres. In addition, she has been a compliance officer for a vulnerable children's program in out-of-home care, and she has extensive experience in risk management, risk assessments, investigation of allegations of harm and abuse, documenting incidents and reporting on trends. Kelly has many years in compliance roles and a strong background in policy development, review and implementation in the children's, community and disability sectors. Kelly also has extensive experience as a child protection trainer. As I said, Kelly now resides in New South Wales, so sadly unable to join us today, but please welcome Kelly speaking to us via a pre-recorded video of her lived experience with mental health pressures in our sector.
Morning everybody, it's great to be here with you virtually today. I would have much preferred to have been there in person. However, obviously with COVID restrictions, I was unable to travel there today to be with you guys. I'm based in Sydney at the moment, but I am grateful for the fact that the restrictions meant that I could pre-record this and put the nerves to one side for the rest of the week and just enjoy the rest of the program. So, as I said, I'm quite nervous. I've never done this before, but I do want to give thanks to the Mental Health Foundation of Australia for having me, and especially to Kira for inviting me to speak to you guys today. We're all here for the same reason, and that's to discuss the status of mental health in the context of early childhood education and care settings, childcare centres, if you will. So let me go back a little and explain to you how I've come to be here today. I started working in childcare at the ripe old age of 17 as a trainee, taking home $255 a week. At the time, I was flipping through a newspaper one day a few months after leaving high school, not really knowing which direction my life was going to take, and after circling a few ads, I finally plucked up the courage to call one of the centres. It was the first call that I made and the first full-time job that I had. I know what you're all thinking, surely she's not old enough to have applied for jobs via the newspaper, but I can assure you that I've felt every single one of the nearly 19 years I've now been working in the childcare space. I'm not going to sit here and say, back in my day, but what I will say is that childcare was not back then what it is now. It's just a snippet of what I've experienced as an early childhood educator. Sometime in my first 2 years, I was supervising a group of toddlers in the playground when the post office across the road from our centre was robbed by some guys in black jackets with sawn-off rifles. It was all very dramatic. It was actually the puffer jackets that first caught my attention because it was the middle of summer at the time. We didn't have sophisticated lockdown procedures back then like we do now, but we pretty swiftly moved everyone inside as quickly as we could. Of course, little Olivia remained oblivious in the sandpit, and I was the closest person available to go back and get her. As I locked eyes with one of the guys, my heart sank and I grabbed the baby by the arm, reaping her out of the sandpit and back inside. I cried that afternoon as I told her mum that I might have hurt her arm, and she cried as she told me she'd rather her daughter alive with a dislocated shoulder. That same year I made comments to some of my colleagues about a dance teacher who we shared a hall with because I didn't feel right about his interactions with some of the children that he was teaching, although when I tried to make it formal I was told that the gut feeling didn't count. And it wasn't until around 10 years later I read the newspaper article about Grant Davies being convicted and jailed for abusing his students. And that one definitely hurt for a long time. From that centre I moved to another one as a group leader. By now I had my diploma, but that piece of paper didn't help when a child had his first major seizure on the mat in the middle of group time. I made sure I suggested counselling to the parents of the 20 or so children who were fairly traumatised by the experience, but we didn't even consider counselling for ourselves. A few years later, 2 siblings disclosed to me that their father was sexually abusing them. I had to watch as I lied to mum when she dropped off the children the next day, knowing that 2 detectives were waiting in the staff room to take her into the station. The look of total betrayal on her face said it all. The children were court-ordered to remain at the centre, and I spent hours on end at the police station recounting the details the children had given me. It wasn't until a few days later when the little boy asked me what car I drove, to which I questioned why he was interested, that he replied that his father wanted to know. And that's when I really understood the severity of the situation. An ABO was put in place several months later, all the charges were dropped and the children were pulled out of care. And I still wonder about them often. After that incident, I kind of started to question whether I wanted to be in childcare anymore. It kind of wasn't what I had signed up for, so I took a brief hiatus working in retail for a short amount of time. And it wasn't to last though, because my heart was in childcare. By now, in the mid-2000s, whereupon I was working as a centre manager, and I dealt with the breakdown of multiple marriages, counselled mothers through the grief of losing a partner, coached fathers through the world of parenting alone, supported children whose worlds had turned upside down. I navigated the challenges of a homeless staff member who was breaking into the centre at night to eat. I played mediator to staff members who shared a partner to their shock discovery. I was starting to think that I'd seen it all. But then one day along came baby Charlie. His mum pushed him into the centre at 3 days old. She was distressed and frantic, telling me a story about having her purse stolen from her and having to run back up to the bus stop to go get it. I didn't really have much time to process what was happening, but I know how to handle babies, so what could go wrong? It was about an hour later that I realised something had gone wrong, and it dawned on me that she wasn't coming back. So now I had a 3-day-old baby who wouldn't stop screaming because he needed his nappy changed. But in a beautiful twist of fate, after the horrible process of handing this baby over to the police against every bone in my body, Mum came back a few days later. We sat for hours and she told me her purse was never stolen. She was suffering postnatal depression and thought that the centre would be the safest place to leave the baby. We both cried that day and she ended up enrolling him, so I got to see him and her grow into happy, healthy people. These are just a few examples of the situations we're faced with working in childcare, and I can assure you I've not seen the worst or the most challenging. I know a lot of colleagues and employees who have been through similar and then some. 10 years later, 2020 would have potentially been one of the most challenging years for the childcare world. Uncertainty around the pandemic, the stigma of illness or caring for vulnerable people, government restrictions, financial instability, the view that free childcare for families was a solution. These issues didn't even touch on the individual challenges each staff member then had to contend with outside of work. Whilst a large majority of the population had the option to start working from home, our childcare educators knew that was never an option for them. What we saw out of the pandemic is something we already knew for many years, and that's that childcare is hard. Not many of us are technically qualified to deal with half the issues we face on a day-to-day basis. We aren't nurses or counsellors, we aren't mediators, we certainly aren't police, and more than anything, many of us aren't trained to deal with the significant traumatic events that we witness. But yet we do too often, and then we sit back and we wonder why there's such a high turnover of staff in the sector, or why we're seeing an increase in the failing mental health of our nation's educators. In preparation for this presentation, I spoke to a lot of peers, ex-colleagues, staff, people I know in general who have worked in various capacities in the childcare space. So if you're sick of hearing from me for a minute, let's hear from them. And excuse me while I get very technical and share my screen with you guys. That one was that. This is a reality. This is what we're hearing. Out there in the industry, this is what people are dealing with, and this is the reality of it. Many people are torn between loving their job and their job being a source of their stress. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we face. As many of you would likely also know, there's a lot of data around Australians and mental health. Around 45% of Australians between the ages of 16 and 85 will experience a mental health condition at some point in their lifetime. And it's further estimated that for all untreated mental health conditions currently, this will cost Australian workplaces approximately $10.9 billion per year when you factor in absentees and compensation claims. In terms of what this looks like for a workplace, 1 in 5 Australians have taken time off work in the past 12 months because they felt stressed, anxious, depressed or mentally unhealthy. A survey by the Australian Education Union Victorian branch discovered that almost 84%, which is a massive number, of preschool educators had children in their care who had behavioural issues and mental health concerns, and not being equipped to deal with children's increasing mental health needs impacted on the mental health of the educators themselves. The same survey revealed that nearly 64% of educators reported feelings of stress most or all of the time. 43% claimed they experienced anxiety, 16.5% suffered from depression, and these figures were all as a direct result of their work as an educator and the expectations placed upon them in caring for children. So what do we need to do? Workplace wellness is not just about creating nice, friendly working environments for people. We need to focus on ensuring all of our people are aware of their rights and responsibilities with regards to employee mental health. What we do already know is that optimal employee mental health is not only important for the educators, but perhaps even more so for the children and families we work with. Using a top-down approach, organisations need to be focusing on what employee mental health looks like in their own context, and thankfully this very conversation we're having today demonstrates that we're starting to do that. On a more micro level, approved providers and nominated supervisors need to be trained in identifying and responding to employee mental health concerns from both a proactive and reactive perspective. Proactivity includes things like clear and measurable position descriptions, ongoing professional development, coaching, mentoring, creating a culture of positivity and engagement around employee mental health. It shouldn't be something we avoid or put in the too hard basket. It also shouldn't be something we see as someone else's problem. The reality is it is our problem and we need to deal with it. Reactivity is more around some of those examples that I gave earlier when something goes sideways, which inevitably it will. At some point, working with children, we need to make sure we're responding to that appropriately. Getting employees engaged with debriefing and counselling after traumatic events or ongoing issues such as the pandemic is vitally important. The facts are pretty obvious. Childcare is a highly emotive and often stressful role. The mental health of our educators is declining and it's costing childcare centres financially, reputationally and operationally. We all have a role to play in turning this around and I'm glad to be playing my own small role in that. Working as an operations manager with early learning management, I saw firsthand all of these stresses highlighted during the pandemic. We managed centres in New South Wales, Queensland and Victoria, and some states were hit much harder than others. From this, we created our workplace wellness program to ensure we were providing training and resources to nominated supervisors regarding their role in supporting their own team. I've spent more time in the last 18 months as an unofficial counsellor than I ever have before, so to ensure my role was as useful as it could be, this year I started my diploma of counselling to be able to better support people with their mental health journey. Childcare relies on the dedicated educators who turn up to work each day in an already stressful environment. So the least we can do for them and for the children is focus on making life a little easier where we can. Knowing that I'm speaking to a group of like-minded people today who will play very different and diverse roles within the childcare space, I can confidently say that we will all benefit from this. I thank you for your time and attention today. I hope I did okay. I can now say that I've been a keynote speaker, so thanks for the experience.
I know she can't hear me, but Kelly did a great job. And hearing those real life stories kind of takes... Sorry?
She's watching.
Oh, she's watching. Kelly, you did amazing. Great job as I looked down the barrel of the camera. So you did great. Thank you very much. It's a shame you couldn't be here today. Hearing you speak live about those real life experiences takes me back to when I was a centre director. And I think you got paid more than me, so you might be a little bit older. But, you know, that when I was a centre director, I didn't have my educators and my employees coming and telling me they were stressed or their doctors diagnose them with anxiety. So now, when our campus managers and our directors say to us, I've got staff who are suffering anxiety or they're depressed, or we don't know how to deal with that. So you're right. Approved providers and employers need resources and ideas. So today is an incredible opportunity to talk about that. And I think that whilst there's a lot of negativity surrounding these discussions, there also is a lot of positivity. And so that's a perfect segue to introduce our next keynote speaker, Christopher Phoenix, or Chris. So Chris is the Wellbeing Specialist for Phoenix Support for Educators and co-author of the Phoenix Cups book, The Phoenix Cups, a cup-filling story. He tours Australia and beyond, delivering the Phoenix Cups model through a highly entertaining workplace wellbeing workshop and keynote presentation. So Chris, thank you for being here today, and please welcome to the stage. Thank you.
Okay, before we begin, I notice we've all been sitting down for quite a bit of time, so I want to do a quick moment of brain gym just to get the two hemispheres of our brains talking to each other again. So if I can get everyone to stand up for just a moment. Do you need me to talk into this microphone? Because I like to walk around and get a bit of energy. Yeah?
Sorry, we do.
You do? Oh, for the recording. Oh, wait, we've got a roving mic. Here we go. Great. Okay. Perfect, thank you. Great. Okay, so this is called brain gym. What I want you to do is get one hand out and point a finger with that hand. Yep, so don't make a gun. The thumb up is a gun, so just a finger. And on the other hand, a thumb. So it's called finger and a thumb, don't make a gun. All right, and in a moment, what we're going to do is we're going to swap. And then swap. So no guns, swap. And swap, and swap, and swap. 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 What's really funny is it's difficult at first, but you do it for a couple of minutes, all of a sudden you get it, and you just yawn your way from there. All right, here's another one. Put your hands down in front like this. Put your hands down like this. Cross your hands over. Put your interlock your fingers, and then put your thumbs down together, so your thumbs are sticking at the bottom, yeah, like that. And then at the same time, everybody do this. Trick cheers. Okay. I'll set my little timer, because I know we don't have much time, so this is my educator wellbeing workshop. So I deliver this around the country in keynotes and in workshops. So it usually goes for an hour or 2.5 hours in a workshop. But what I'm going to do now is give you a 15-minute version of this educator wellbeing workshop. Some of you have seen this and some of you haven't, so I'm going to run through some of these points here. First part is on work-life balance. Who here has absolutely nailed work-life balance? Who's got your work life sorted, your personal life sorted, everything is perfect right now? No one, great. If you put your hand up, I was going to give you this, I was going to sit down and I was going to take notes for the rest of the day, right? But work-life balance, that's the other pandemic we're kind of facing, isn't it? Trying to achieve work-life balance. How do we achieve work-life balance? Because in philosophy it's called a duality, when you've got two competing concerns, and and that causes a tension between these two competing concerns. This the most famous one is the mind-body connection, right? But the other one is this idea of work-life balance. So what we do in our company is we've got this framework called the Phoenix Cups, and we're trying to apply this to this work-life balance. We're like, well, how do we do this? And the more we thought about it, the more we thought, actually, maybe it's just the way we're thinking about it. Maybe there isn't ever going to be a work-life balance, because at the end of the day, life is just life. Life is one big messy hole. Who you are at home and who you are at work are essentially the same person. What's expected of you in each location is a little bit different, but you're that same person at the end of the day. So instead of work-life balance, we propose something which we like to call life needs balance. And what's life needs balance? Dun, dun, dun. I need the anticipation box to hang up. And the answer is, I'll take you on a bit of a journey first. Why do people behave the way they do, right? This is a question that's been asked for centuries. Used to be philosophers that used to ask the questions, and then it was the psychologists, because psychology is a fairly new discipline. It's around 150 years old, but it used to be philosophers who asked the big questions, the metaphysical questions, the ontological questions. But one of the big questions is, why do people behave the way they do? Now, this super happy chap here called Arthur Schopenhauer, he had a good theory of why people behave the way they do. He thought it was something called the will to life. He thought inside absolutely everybody and everything, plants, humans, animals, anything that's alive, is this thing called the will to life that's an unconscious motivator to essentially force us to survive and reproduce at the end of the day. He thought that's all we do at the end of the day, is survive and reproduce. This is why he looked so miserable. He didn't even believe in he didn't even believe in love. He thought that the will to life tricks the intellect so you find the perfect partner to have the strongest offspring with, right? So this is why he got so upset. Now, although he might not have been quite right, although he might not have been quite right, he still influenced a lot of people. So he influenced Charles Darwin in his idea of natural selection, and he influenced Sigmund Freud in this idea of the unconscious mind, unconscious drivers. Right. Now, after him was this other guy called Friedrich Nietzsche. Now, he was a big fan of Schopenhauer, but the more he thought about it, he thought, well, why do people choose behaviours sometimes that put the will to life at risk? If we were just truly behaving just to survive and reproduce, why would anybody say skydive? You know, like what people do today, some of these behaviours, right? He thought the same sort of thing though, what other behaviours we do can be summarised by something he called the will to power. He thinks that everything at the end of the day that's alive is just trying to better its situation. Now these were the philosophers. Then you see the psychologists come on board, and they look a lot more happier than the philosophers. Who knows who this guy is? I'm sure a few of you. Yeah, his name is Abraham Maslow. He thought what motivated all human behaviour was something called needs, basic human needs, right? So his idea was that we behave in ways to get our needs met. So needs are different to desires, and the need you can see across all different cultures, across all different times. They lead to ill-being if you don't get them met, and well-being if you get them met. So he thought our needs were somewhat of a hierarchy, that you work your way up the hierarchy lucidly, depending on what's going on in your life. So you have your physiological needs met. Once you generally got those needs met, you move on to your safety needs, up to your love and belonging, esteem and self-actualisation if we're very, very lucky. And we sort of just move up and down around the hierarchy, depending on what's going on in our lives. So prior to COVID, we're probably all doing pretty well. Then all of a sudden COVID hits and we drop down to the physiological needs and we're fighting over toilet paper in the shopping centres, right? So this is what was happening there. And then after that came this super happy chap called Dr. William Glasser. Now he believed that we have basic human needs, but he didn't necessarily think they were a hierarchy. He thought that we had a needs profile. He thought that we all have a need for love and belonging, a need for power, recognition and control, a need for fun and learning, a need for survival, and a need for freedom. So he said all of us had the exact same 5 needs, except we had different size needs. So you might meet someone with a big need for love and belonging, and someone else with a smaller need for love and belonging, so their behaviours are going to be different. You might meet someone with a ginormous need for power, recognition and control, like the ex-president of the US, and then you might meet someone else with a medium-sized need for power. So their behaviours are going to be different. Sorry, this is the fastest I've delivered this workshop. So teaching this work to educators, because my wife is an expert in children's behaviour. So she was teaching this work to educators around children's behaviour. She was saying, if you just try to change behaviour and not the function behind the behaviour, a different behaviour is going to come up in its place. So she happened to have a glass with her, and she filled it with water. She goes, if this is the child's need for love and belonging, if it's only half full, they're going to keep choosing behaviours to get the rest of that cup full. And that was the birth of the Phoenix Cups. So this is the cups as they stand today. Each of us had these same 5 cups, and these cups represent different basic needs. We all have a mastery cup, we all have a safety cup, we all have a freedom cup, we all have a connection cup, and we all have a fun cup. So we all have these 5 cups which represent different basic human life needs. The difference is we all have different size cups, which makes up our unique cups profile. So that's where it was at the time. She was initially just trying to explain choice theory with it, but because choice theory was done in the early 90s, it's now evolved, and these are just some of the theorists, psychologists, philosophers and theorists that have made up where the cups are today. And it just continues to evolve with the work that we all do as a company towards the Phoenix Cups. So each cup represents a different basic human life need. We all have different size cups, and every behaviour we choose is to fill one or more of these different cups. So another big difference between the Phoenix Cups and other theories, such as self-determination theory, is that we think that cups have an outcome. For instance, we think the outcome of a freedom cup is a sense of autonomy. We're trying to achieve a sense of autonomy. We have a mastery cup, the outcome of which we're trying to achieve a sense of self-confidence. We have a fun cup, we're trying to achieve a sense of joy. We have a connection cup, we're trying to achieve a sense of self-worth. And we have a safety cup, which we're trying to achieve a sense of security. And a big difference between, I guess, Maslow and Glasser is that the safety cup represents that psychological and physiological need for safety and security. So let's have a quick look at some of these cups in a little bit more detail, what you might see in top traits. So if you meet someone with a dominant safety cup, they might have a big need for security. They often like to get a lot of rest. They like a bit of predictability in their life, and they like a lot of stability. I think of my best friend. She's been in a job for 20 years in banking, which she absolutely hates, but it's stable for her. And we go to the same cafe every single weekend because she knows what's on the menu, she knows the parking, she knows what she's going to get when she gets there, right? Where I've got a huge freedom cup and I like to explore and find new cafes where she wants to feel safe and secure going to the same place, right? Big connection cups, they like to connect with everybody around them. They like to show a lot of affection usually, they like to be included. If you've got two best friends and they're not invited to a party, the person with the big connection cup might get FOMO, the person with the small connection cup might get JOMO, you know, the joy of missing out. Yeah. And they like to be accepted, right? So, I won't tell a story. I can tell endless stories, but I won't do that, I'll stick to time. Freedom cups, I've got a huge freedom cup. I like a sense of autonomy, I like a lot of choice, I like a lot of adventure. I like to get out and explore, I like to travel a lot. But you can have, two people can have the same dominant cup and have completely different behaviours. So where I like to get out and explore and travel, so this job is great, I get to fly around the country doing this. My stepdaughter also has an equally sized freedom cup, except for she likes to just lock herself in her room and do her art without people, you know, interrupting her. Mastery cups. Mastery cups like a lot of achievement. They like to get stuff done. They like to be efficient. They like to be competent. I always think of my wife. I say she's got a Mastery cup swimming pool. But when we got Mario Kart on the Nintendo Switch, turns out she was terrible at it. So she kicked all the kids off and kicked me off. And so she had it to herself for 2 days straight till she could actually compete with us. And now we just pick on her and we all gang up on it. And they like to be in control of things. And fun cups. Fun cups like a lot of play, they like a lot of excitement, they like a lot of humour, and learning. Learning actually fits within the fun cup. Fun is a genetic reward for learning. So have you ever tried to learn something you weren't interested in? It was really, really boring and you don't retain much. Versus something that you are excited about, you can just fly into it, you get absorbed into it, you get into that flow state, and time just seems to fly by. So we have different cups profiles, which essentially creates our different personalities in a sense. So I've got a dominant freedom cup, my wife Sandy has a dominant mastery cup. Now if we didn't know each other, those cups can essentially conflict because they're kind of different competing concerns. But because we know our own needs and another person's needs, we know how to get our needs met without affecting other people. So that's called the skill to fill, skills we need to develop to ensure that our cups are full without affecting other people. So at the end of the day, we start to cupify everything we see. So Sandy and I, we cupify people, we cupify situations. We've even got a podcast called Cupify This, where we do that in person. But we do a lot of these workshops after hours. So we come into early childhood settings at usually 6 p.m. to start 6:30 workshops. So by the end of the day, everyone's always that little bit tired. So we can see people's cups as they walk into the room. Actually, even before seeing them, we hear the fun cups coming, right? They're in the car parks with their bottles of wine and the boxes of chocolates and they're whistling and, so you can hear the fun cups. They burst into the room. The mastery cup is at the front saying, you fun cups sit there, you other fun cups sit to the other side of the room. Put a secret, not a secret, put something between them so they can't make that eye language with each other and do those jokes from across the room. The safety cup comes in. Actually, there's two types of safety cups. There's a safety cup who sits by the catering all night, and then there's the other safety cup who comes in with the Lorna Jane because they come straight from the gym because they're really taking care of their health. But we do know that we have to stop on time for the safety cups because if they don't get 8 hours of sleep a night, they're so hard to work with the next day. Right? And then we got the connection cups. They come in and hug every single person in the room except for the person with the small safety cup. They're like, don't touch me, I won't touch you, we'll get along just fine. Freedom cups, we don't usually see freedom cups at these after hours events. They're usually off planning trips to Bali or whatever they're doing. But we need freedom cups in the early childhood sector. They get the children outside, right? They get that adventure and the creativity going. So when a person has full cups, we feel good and have that strong sense of well-being. Because even the word need means you need it, you require it. But when that need is met, you feel good, you have that sense of well-being. And I think that's that realistic version of well-being, that everything feels just right, your needs are all being met. But when our needs aren't being met, or when our cups are emptying, that's when we've got that unease within us, and we're driven to choose behaviours to get our needs met. And that driving force that I talk about, where Schopenhauer talked about the will to life, Nietzsche talked about the will to power, I come up with this term called the will to fill. And this is me looking with my black and white visible picture to add to all the other philosophers. So the will to fill is, essentially the will to fill is the empty part of the cup. It's that part that motivates us to choose cup-filling behaviours to get our needs met. So that's the part that's going to motivate us to choose. So you don't have to do anything for the will to fill, it's innate. Wherever your biggest cups, your dominant cups, that's where you're more likely to see the will to fill. But even your smaller cups, if all of a sudden that cup is empty, then you're going to be more motivated to fill that even over your dominant cups, because that's where that will is driving you. And just to outdo me for coming up with the will to fill, my wife came along and said, I can rhyme too, and she came up with the skill to fill. So where the will to fill is the unconscious internal driver that motivates you to get your needs met, it's the skill to fill are the intentional behaviours you choose to ensure that your needs are met. So the skill to fill is knowing the skills to develop a set of behavioural choices that will reliably ensure that your needs are met. So it's the process, the intentionality of active cup filling behaviours. So the will to fill drives us, and that's innate, you don't have to do anything for it, but it's the skill to fill that creates fulfillment. So we never lack the will to fill, but we've got to develop the skill to fill to ensure that our needs are met and we achieve those levels of well-being. So what we've got to do is work out what our own cups profiles are. We've got to find out what our needs are, our dominant needs and our smaller needs, and where that will to fill arrives. And then we need to come up with really good cup filling plans, right? Because I think this is what life needs balance is. Coming up with full cups, a cup filling plan to fill our cups at home and in the workplace. Because if you start the day with full cups, if an event happens at work, it's only going to take a splash out of that cup. But if that cup was already half empty and something happens, that cup's going to get knocked over. So coming up with full cups to ensure that our needs are met. So working out what our cups profile is, which we've created a quiz to finally do. I used to have to speak out every question, but it's only a 5-minute quiz. Would you rather A or D or B or C? And work out what your cups profile is, and then come up with a cup filling plan. And the best way to do that is to work out how you know your cups are empty. Because most of the time we know when we're in a bad mood, we know that there's something wrong, we're in disharmony. That's giving you an indicator that one of your needs is not being met. So work out what needs that are, what cup is being emptied, then work out that what do you usually fill that cup with? That's that gratitude part. What do I usually have in my life that fills my connection cup? Who are those people that fill that? What can I do more of? And just activating and being grateful for those people starts to fill that cup. But then you can also make a plan to do more of that. And then we can build our skill to fill. What other activities can I do to get the rest of that need met? And I've done it with 14 seconds to go. I did not know I could do it, and I spoke really, really fast. But thank you so much for having me. That was the Educated Wellbeing Workshop, 15 minutes. We have some resources, but in particular the free podcast. But we have a free podcast, so feel free to jump on the podcast, and that will teach you a lot more about the cups. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Chris. That was amazing.
Great.
We've got a certificate here, and there's a plaque in the mail.
Oh, okay.
So thank you for your time. Amazing.
Right, thank you.
Very, very, very inspiring. So it's morning tea time now, which will fill up your cups, ready for the panel discussion. Nice segue. We are delighted to have Terry here now. Thank you for joining us. So we thought we'll go into morning tea, and you can have a discussion with Terry over morning tea if you like. And then we'll come back for a panel discussion moderated by Kira Lee with all of us, and you can throw all your tough questions. Hopefully we'll come up with some good answers for you. The only rule I've been advised is that we have to sit down while we're eating today. So enjoy your morning tea. Stage 2, yeah. And then we'll be back at 11:10. Thank you very much.
I was like, I'm going to read it.
Very good. mentioned this morning, we had to rearrange the agenda a little bit, so we are delighted now to welcome Mr. Terry Young, MP. Mr. Young has been a member of the House of Representatives since the 2019 federal election, representing the division of Longman in Queensland, a proud father and grandfather, so it's my pleasure to welcome Terry to the stage. Thank you so much. Welcome.
Hello everyone, I'm very sorry that I made you rearrange your schedule today. It was out of my control. It wasn't the traffic, I just got held up at a previous meeting, but it's great to be here today. And as is my custom, my beautiful girl at the office who writes my speeches does a tremendous job, and half the time I end up going off course and just saying it from the heart anyway, so bear with me if I go down that path. But first of all, let me acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Childcare. What a tough couple of years it's been in childcare, and a lot of industries around the place. And you know, I think that there's an underlying pandemic that we're just starting to see now, and that's the mental health caused by some of the things that have been instituted by governments, employers and so forth around the country as far as a workplace. And people in childcare, not only does it affect them and the kids that they look after, but it's a knock-on effect. It's the parents as well. You know, because we know that over the next 10 years, there are going to be things that surface from this pandemic in the way of mental health. And if you had a crystal ball, you'd probably look forward and go, okay, if we do all these lockdowns and mask wearing mandates and things like that, we've saved 2,000 people from COVID. Well, I say if we've saved 2,000 people from COVID, but we've lost 10,000 to suicide, which is worse. The trouble is none of us has a crystal ball, do they? And all these things are done with the best intentions. And I'm not throwing aspersions at any particular organisation or governments or anything like that. Everything is done with the best intention. But at the end of the day, mental health is such an underlying, insidious disease, and that's what it is. It's a terrible thing. And I think one of the things that I've come to understand about mental health in particular is that it's something people don't like to talk about. You know, there's almost a stigma attached. And I'm very pleased to see over the last probably 10 years that men, I'll say this as a male of the species, that we're not particularly good at talking about that stuff. You ladies are a lot better at talking about stuff. And I think it's just the male ego. We like to say, I'm strong, you know, I don't want to show weakness. Well, it's not weak to get up and talk about something that's hurting you. And I think these symposiums are a great thing because the great key to getting through mental health issues is awareness and talking about it. And recently I came back from Canberra and I had to endure 2 weeks of home quarantine. I was lucky enough to do home quarantine, not hotel quarantine. That's a whole other story in itself, but a friend of mine was doing it at the same time. He works for Coca-Cola, and he was doing it in a hotel. And he had great delight in sending me a photo of his food, and it looked like something from MASH, where Igor used to hand the food out. It was absolutely disgraceful. I took great delight in sending him back a photo of the beautiful meal that I just cooked at home, but anyway, just stirring him up. But just in that 2 weeks, I'm fortunate enough that I have two properties, and I said to my wife, look, rather than you be at home with me because you can't be in the same room, we can't sleep in the same bedroom, every time you go out I've got a deep clean before you come back. I said, you just stay in the other house and I'll stay in this house. So I batched it for 2 weeks, which got a little bit untidy and there was a lot of takeaway involved. But just in that 2 weeks, even though I was in my own home, in my own comforts, I couldn't believe some of the thoughts I started to have. I actually it was weird, you know, I'm Zooming, I'm Teamsing, I'm texting, I'm emailing, I'm talking on the phone, but just that no interaction with another human being, to brush past them, to touch them. Just those little things that we take for granted every day. When they're taken from you, they take their toll. And I was very fortunate that I had a great circle of friends and great family, and I got phone calls every day saying, are you okay, mate? And I think that's one of the things that I want to stress to you today is that when you're around your colleagues or people who are involved in your industry, ask that question. That's a great initiative, that Are You OK Day. It should be every day. If you know someone who's going through that sort of thing, I cannot tell you how much, having from experience, how much better it makes you feel just for someone to pick up the phone and take the time and say, are you okay, mate? It lifts your spirits. So I encourage you all to make that a practice in your own lives. As far as the childcare industry goes, you know, I just want to thank and acknowledge everyone in the childcare industry for what they've done over the past 20 months, because I know it's been a very, very, very tough gig. And all I can say is that I'm very happy that by Christmas time, hopefully we'll be up to the 80% vaccination rate, which will give us our freedoms back, in theory. And I'm sure that's a day that we're all looking forward to. So, look, thank you for your time today. And again, I just want to encourage you and thank you. And please just make sure you ask that question of your colleagues or any of the parents of the children that you look after. Are you okay? Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. That's for you. Thanks very much. Thank you. So thank you so much, Terry, for your presentation and for being here today. It's great to hear from you. So now I'll invite Kira Lee back to the stage. I think I'm moving to a hot seat, and Kira Lee will be our moderator. So thank you.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a brief introduction for each of our panel members, and once I've done that, if they could then individually come up to the stage for me, that would be great. I just want to give you a bit of a rundown on who everybody is. I'm sure you've all got plenty of questions, but I wanted to give you a bit of a background about each of their professional areas so that we're able to put questions to the most appropriate person. Jay Fraser. Believe it or not, he's not a professional MC. He does have other amazing skills and experience. Jay is not just our MC, he's the founder of Little Scholars Early Learning. Jay is a university qualified early childhood educator with over 20 years hands-on experience in early childhood education. Academic credentials include a Bachelor of Education, an Advanced Diploma of Early Childhood Education, and several business management qualifications spanning across the many spectrums of the childcare and education industry. To complement these achievements, Jay has worked in all sectors of the education and care sector, from teacher at the hands-on level through to campus management and operations senior management positions throughout Australia and Singapore. Jay is an executive of the Australian Childcare Alliance and is an active advocate for children and education. Jay's proudest achievement is the creation of the Little Scholars School of Early Learning, 10 premium early learning campuses across southeast Queensland providing care and education for more than 4,500 children. Jay, if you'd like to come and join us. Our next panellist is Alison Lamb. I met Alison far too many years ago, and we've followed you through many different organisations, and you've been an integral part to our business. So Alison's current role is an early childhood training consultant with Cool Kids Training College. Alison has been in the early childhood industry for over 30 years in a variety of roles. She holds a Diploma of Teaching, Early Childhood, and a Bachelor of Education, majoring in Early Childhood, and a Certificate 4 in TAE and TAE LLN. Is that how we say it? Okay. Alison has worked in preschools, primary schools, long day care and outside school care environments. She has trained specialised officers in the Office for Early Childhood Education and Care on education and care services regulatory changes, and was involved in the initial development and trialling of the Early Years Learning Framework. Alison, if you'd like to come and join us, please. Michael Peckick. Mick is the founder and CEO of In Safe Hands. Did you have to be separated? No? Mick is the founder and CEO of In Safe Hands, Educators in Safety. Michael has nearly 30 years' experience in child protection, case management, investigation and education. He has formal qualifications in management, training, investigation practices and public safety. Mick served with distinction as a detective with the Queensland Police Service for 20 years, investigating child abuse offences, being awarded the Assistant Commissioner's Award for dedication to child protection. He has dedicated the last 10 years to education and awareness of child protection issues. Mick, if you'd like to. Our next panellist is Josie Sorban. Josie is a clinical psychologist who has over 40 years working as a psychologist in the field of mental health. with specialty endorsements as both a clinical and educational and developmental psychologist. Josie has experience in working with adult mental health and also with children and adolescents, a field in which she has amassed specialised expertise, heading up public paediatric psychology services within children's health as a director of psychology for children at the Queensland Health Service. In maintaining her contributions to psychology, Josie provides supervision to psychology registrars and interns and is a staff member at QUT's School of Psychology. Our last panel, is it our last panellist? Yes. Our last panellist is Chris Phoenix, who you met just before morning tea, as one of our keynote speakers. Thank you for joining us on the panel. If you'd like to... Okay, so the format for this is a little bit flexible. We have had some questions pre-submitted from attendees who are here with us today, attendees who are joining us virtually. But of course, now that you've had a chance to listen to some of these speakers, we're more than happy to take some questions from the floor. I will kick it off with a few questions that have already been sent in to us.
Virtual people can put it in the chat and it'll get texted.
Oh, right, okay. Susan's just telling me that people who've joined us virtually can actually submit questions via chat and you'll bring them...
They'll get texted to me.
Great, they'll get texted to Susan. So I feel that this is something that could go on forever. So we do have time limitations, and but I do want to get to everybody's questions, and I suspect some of them will be a 2 or a 3-part answer. What I will do when I'm throwing questions to the panel is that I will put it to one of you particularly, based on where I feel is a good place to start with your expertise and the content of the question. But obviously I would love all of you to step in as appropriate. We do have we've got 3 roving mics here, so you'll be able to hear all of the panellists. If you've got a question, when I call for them from the floor, just stick your hand up and Donna will bring the microphone to you. So everyone here can hear your question, but also the virtual questions. Okay. Probably the first question I had, and I'd like to put this to Josie, as an early learning educator, if I was to have experienced a traumatic event within the workplace, and Kelly Dixon touched on some possible ones, and I'm sure a lot of our staff, a lot of our attendees here have experienced those also, how and when should I be recognising that it is still impacting on me personally and on me professionally, and seek out support and intervention?
That's a loaded question in that every person is different, but let me just at the outset say that what was presented is probably only the tip of the iceberg, in that I recognise anyone working with children is faced with quite frightening stories. So I guess it's, if you think about it as everything having an impact on us, the degree of trauma is very subjective, how much you experience it as traumatic. If you find that something that's happened is still on your mind sometime later, how long is sometime depends on the individual, but I would look at a few days. If you can't shake it, then I think that would be concerning. If it lasted a number of months, then definitely you need to get some help. I don't know if that quite answers your question, but it is quite subjective. And the thing is that the support of your colleagues, the people who were with you at the time, is very important immediately after the events. Mm-hmm. Some sort of debrief, but to go on and on about it endlessly, of course, is not helpful. But if you're still thinking about it a few weeks later, get help.
Excellent. Okay. Would anybody else in the panel like to comment on that?
I guess the comment that I would make to that, as an employer, I think it's one of the challenges for us when we're dealing with educators is understanding or determining the level of severity. Kelly raised it before, and we face things all the time in early childhood education and care. We're often counsellors, we're often maintenance people, we're often doing all these things, and people present lots of issues to us. At what point do we decide or do we not decide whether it is a real issue and take it to the next step, or do we revert it to someone else? I think that's the challenge for a lot of early childhood education leaders in the field.
Okay.
I don't know if there's an answer to that question, but it's certainly an observation. It's something that we would see all the time, educators presenting problems or feelings that they're having, and who are we to determine whether it's real and we should take it seriously and move them somewhere or refer them somewhere, or do we just leave it?
Does anybody in the group have a follow-on question for Josie from that, or any commentary that they would like to add before we move on to the next question? Okay. Alison, I'm going to start with you on this one. Given your experience in education as well as the EYLF, we can speak in acronyms now, we're amongst friends, should the nationally accredited early childhood training and ongoing professional development requirements include compulsory mental health management units?
Personally, I do believe it should. It is touched on in terms of the work health and safety units that are within the current training package. However, much more needs to be considered in terms of mental health for staff themselves, but also for management as well, to be able to actually identify appropriately and also be able to understand their feelings as well and be emotionally intelligent as such in that regard. Okay. Anybody else want to comment on that question from the panel?
I think we are starting to see more of that though, like with BU coming on as well. So these things are starting to come out. Like it's usually after the fact, like things occur and then these things start to come into play. So I do think it is happening. I think it's just got to catch up. Yeah.
Okay, Mick, question for you. In relation to the mental health of children and families, will there be a move towards including reporting of mental health concerns under mandatory reporting? And would this make the jobs of educators easier or harder?
Again, a very loaded question. I think the biggest problem about that is that the way that mandatory reporting works now and how the Queensland government or any government in Australia sort of sees how they respond to child protection concerns is all around whether they talk about terms about whether there's somebody there to protect the child or currently are able to protect. And because of that, it allows them not to respond. And so more and more of the pressures just fall back onto early years sector or onto teachers to try and deal with. I think it would be very difficult for them to have a tool that they could apply to how they respond to that within a household. They're definitely going to get a lot more of it, but whether the governments are actually have the ability to respond to it, I don't think that's there. And unfortunately, that's where we continue to turn around and have a look at early intervention and prevention tools as our biggest way of dealing with those issues. And giving educators the tools to be able to identify when things aren't quite right in the household or quite right with a child early, so we can actually put into some systematic sort of approaches to that, to deal with that.
Can I throw a bit of an additional question to the rest of the panel? This is another question that we received, and I think it sort of dovetails off that. Do you feel that mental health support initiatives for educators and children will become more formalised or perhaps even introduced as regulations within childcare? Jay, that might...
Yeah. I think that the challenge, I think we run real risk in trying to regulate this sort of stuff, because I think that if we try and regulate it, I kind of correlate it to, we don't speed because we might get a speeding ticket. We never ever think about if we speed, we might kill someone. So I think if we try and regulate this stuff, we're telling people to do it because the piece of paper tells us to. Let's not focus on regulations, let's not focus on making things law. Let's focus on teaching people the benefits of being mentally healthy. Let's focus on the outcomes of that really great stuff rather than the punishment. I feel like regulations and national laws are all about protection, and I get it and I respect them. But I don't know if they're going to have as much success in this space in our sector as something that would be incentive-based. And I don't mean we're going to pay someone more money if they're mentally healthy, but what I'm saying is, if people understand the positive outcomes of being mentally healthy and all their colleagues being mentally healthy, then I think it's going to be much more successful.
Chris, you've picked up the
Yeah,
microphone.
and then I don't know if I lost my train of thought.
Sorry, Chris.
Welcome to my world, it's fun.
I'll hold on to that till Jay's finished. But I do think it is occurring naturally, as you were saying too. I was watching the PISA conference over the weekend, and Martin Seligman, the positive psychology guru, he was talking about, again, how people start to take this on themselves, where, you know, after COVID, they expected much, you know, of course there's a lot of mental health that's happened because of it, but they are expecting a lot more. And people started taking on board their own well-being. They realised how important it was to themselves when COVID happened. They ignored it for so long. So that work-life balance thing was really going down the drain. And then all of a sudden when COVID hit, people started paying attention to their well-being. So there's a lot more exercise happening, a lot more people paying attention to their diet. So it actually highlighted some of the positives that happened as well. So I don't know if I went completely off script there.
Well, no, you sort of snuck yourself into my next question, which was for you anyway. What are the key differences, and you know, bearing in mind the CUPS method that we spoke about before, what are the key differences and similarities that you are seeing between COVID-related mental health issues faced by educators and children, as opposed to what those issues were 18 months ago pre-COVID?
If I was talking in CUPS, I'd say the connection cut, people trying to, that loss of connection with one another, that's the biggest thing. When we just heard just a moment ago about, you were saying that you're in a house by yourself and you had all the comforts, but that connection, you weren't able to connect with other people. So that's one of the biggest ones we've seen is connection and freedom as well. Yeah, so they're the biggest ones. But, but people are resilient. People come out and they're strong and they bounce back from these things.
Okay, I've got some more questions that we've had from participants, which I can go back to if time allows. But Donna, if you wanted to come and grab a microphone. If any, oh, you've got one there, great. Does anybody have a question from the floor for any of our panellists? And any of our panellists, obviously, feel free to jump in as well. Terry?
Yes, I'm on. More of a comment. I like what you said before, Jay, about rules and regulations. I think that, you know, we need to be proactive in this and develop a culture of being able to see when people are having these struggles and identify those. So I loved what I think it was Michael said about getting it into the program. And, you know, an example of that is that I recently spoke with a hairdresser, and they're pushing to get a mental health component put into hairdressing training, because ladies talk to their hairdressers. And she said, you know, people sit down, and she said, I've had women there who've said to me, I'm feeling threatened by my husband. And she didn't know how to deal with it. But I think what you're saying is spot on, because when we do it with rules and regulations, we're acting reactively. Whereas when we change the culture and we make it part of the training, we're dealing with it proactively. And people are engaged and they see it. So I want to commend you. I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at, and I think events like this are perfect because it starts the conversation. But I think, you know, employers. So for me and my team, my leadership team, who are supporting 30 to 40 or 50 educators, predominantly women, to give them skills and real life resources around even just what to say if a staff member comes to them and says, "I'm feeling anxious today." Well, how do you respond to that? Because are you just feeling anxious because it's a bit windy, or are you feeling anxious because when you go home something really tragic is going to happen to you? We're not skilled to deal with that. So I think, you know, if we can get some resources and some training to help, it's not going to take a lot, but it could really benefit.
Exactly.
Just
can I just say something as the psychologist in that you shouldn't underestimate the value that people have in caring for each other at an everyday level. And I think I'm getting a little confused as to regulations regarding children's mental health or regulations regarding staff mental health. And you can regulate, you know, up the wazoo, but I guess the point of regulation is that it gives you a lack of flexibility, but a requirement to report, and so then that makes you more likely to report. But I think that there's that moral care that we can do with everybody, whether it's connections. We can do with each other, just morally as a group, that not everything has to be addressed at a clinical level, And the other thing I would just like to say, seeing I now have the mic, is people talk about mental health, and as somebody who's been working in the field for 40 years, I think, what exactly are you talking, mental health or mental ill health? And mental health is being in a good headspace, feeling okay about yourself, etc., which we should all be involved in. Mental ill health, down the dark side, is when it's gone terribly bad. And so we need to address that, and depending on where you are in that grey scale, as to the expertise. But in this dirty, unwashed middle that we all belong to, that's where we can help each other, look after each other. I think that Are You OK is a good initiative. I'd argue take it a step longer and say, a step further and say, are you OK? Let's sit down and have a coffee. It's not enough to just say, are you OK? Because everyone says, yeah, I'm OK. So anyway, it's just kind of bearing in mind that there's a role for legislation, but there's also a moral and ethical obligation to look after each other as people, as humanity.
Okay, so the other thing that the other thing that we want to get into is obviously picking your brains for some practical things that we can take back to our environments, that we can be sharing with staff, which will hopefully take those next steps. So I won't put this to anyone in particular here, but feel free to grab the microphone and chip in. What are the main signs in children that are suffering with their mental health? What do centre managers, parents, educators need to be looking for in the workplace that is a sign for them that a child is struggling with their mental health? Mick?
Surely the experts are going to take this one.
That's my wife. I never ask my wife.
We got the wrong figures.
I think safety is still one of the paramounts. I think if a child's not feeling safe, that's when we see them struggle with what we talk about, where trauma-based behaviours is obviously what early childhood get exposed to a lot. But we also need to fundamentally understand that most children now aged up to 12 years of age spend more time awake with an educator than they do with their own parents. So they see your environment as very normal for them. So a lot of children, when you take their first hour before they come to you every single morning, that first hour, they're in survival mode. I always talk about that. The home's rushed, there's yelling, there's people running late, there's everything happening. So, and we know that majority of the children make that switch into your environment very, very well, but there are those small percentages that don't, and that's identifying those children that you have to peel off a parent. They only go to one educator every morning, or they hit the ground and they take you an hour to control them to get them back into the early sector environment. That's that danger child for children where they feel like they're being isolated and that trauma. There's been a lot of study around that, especially in Ohio education, about doing simple things. You saw it on the media, social media, where we saw educators doing a special handshake with every child when they arrive, a special dance with children, doing those simple things when children arrive in the morning, where you might have an A-frame blackboard where they can pick 3 different ways of saying hello to an educator in the morning, picking how they want to say goodbye to their parents every morning, gets children to make the switch to your environment. And if they feel safe, then that gives us that early intervention tool to be able to say the child's still not showing normal signs, they're having reluctance of engaging and all those sort of things. We'll start to show you there's more underlying mental health issues. But I think if we don't allow them to make that switch into your environment to feel safe, then we won't see that cognitive, emotional ability for them to actually demonstrate if there's more underlying issues. So that's something.
Josie, would you like to add to that?
I guess in terms of specific behaviours, which I think you were asking, I think if there's any significant change in the child's, we're talking about children, aren't we?
Yes.
Any significant change in the child's behaviour, so that would require you to get to know them. But I mean, as educators, you'd be alert to them, things like being isolated, things like bad behaviour, but never underestimate how much you get told as an educator once a child trusts you. I used to worry about what my children would say to the teacher. But really, you hold so much privileged information, and the other thing is to not underestimate how important you are to a child, because you are spending an awful lot of time with them. So somebody mentioned something about gut feeling. It was in the pre-recorded. I think you've got to look at your gut feeling if you're feeling something's wrong, and then go a bit further. You don't necessarily act on a gut feeling immediately, but I would look for evidence. Does that behaviour withdrawn, that kind of thing, of course, which you would all know about.
Does anyone from the floor have a bit of an anecdotal story or a bit of an event that happened to them in terms of identifying mental health amongst the children? Yes? Donna, have you got a microphone for Pugby, please?
Thank you, Donna. I'm not sure how it can relate to the mental health, but just my experience. My little one had got only 5 days, fortnight in the kindergarten. So basically he had to go to 2 places. So it's very difficult for a child, they make the choices, each individuals or educators set of the leadership is different. So some of the places they like, some of them they don't, for whatever given reason. So it's a very thin line to call that whether they're stressed out, is it anything wrong with the childcare center, or just the child is finding difficult to adjust to 2 different environments. Yeah, the change is so it has to be dealt very delicately or taken more time, as Josie said. We have to give some time, just not the gut feeling, but sometimes we have to try and understand what the child is feeling, just not completely switch over to say either they're having trouble at home or at the childcare. It might not be either of the things. It's just the time they're finding to adjust between the 2 different caretakers. So that's been my experience, and now he's 12, he's all fine, and he still remembers.
But he didn't want to go to school today.
He still remembers. He said, Mama, you gave me such a thin blanket to put on, I used to feel cold. I said, really? Do you remember that? So yeah, the kids are very smart, and I agree we cannot underestimate their level of thinking and how much they can share with the caretaker. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on from the children.
Can I just make a quick point before we go
for
on? I find being a trainer, I tend to go to a variety of different childcare services throughout Queensland, and I find, especially since the pandemic has started, we have a situation where children who've been in lockdown for a long time, they come back, they have to reinitiate all their friendship groups, they have to reinitiate their behaviours and their relationships with their educators as well, and that can have a major impact on their mental health. So things that we need to be considering as educators is that child may not want to go to you today simply because of the fact that they haven't seen you for 6 weeks and they're not sure whether they still trust you or not. So we need to be mindful of that as well.
I would like to say something. I know, at my centre, a lot of our families are essential workers in the very purest of forms. Nurses, defence personnel, police, that type of thing. We're both carers of that child, are working in essential industries. And so they rely really, really heavily on the grandparents. And so, one grandparent might do 3 days drop off, one grandparent might pick up 2 days. And so it's that routine that Prakriti was talking about. And that was what my girls struggled with in the first lockdown that we had, was that disconnection that they had. So, because they said to the grandparents, don't leave the house. All the grandparents stay home, don't go to childcare, don't see your grandchildren, protect your health. So all of a sudden we had children that were in a great routine that worked, and they were building beautiful relationships with their grandparents, and all of a sudden that's all changed. But the other thing that happened is that their classes halved in size, because those children who didn't have parents who were essential workers, they'd chosen to stay home. So half their friends are missing, they're not seeing their grandparents. And so I know the girls put a lot of time and a lot of effort into, we really went quite old school, didn't we, into communication methods to keep those children connected with their grandparents and connected with the other children that weren't there, because it was something as simple as that disconnection that sort of started the ball rolling.
I think that's a really good observation, Kiralee, and a great tool. And I think the other thing that we learnt at our services is that we had to talk real with the children. So helping the children understand that what we were going through, what was happening to them, why their friends potentially weren't at kindy, why they couldn't see their friends on the weekend, was because of a pandemic. Because there's a virus out there that we need to protect ourselves and keep ourselves safe from. And I think, you know, early on, I think we all were trying to protect children from the awful feelings that we were having, because we didn't know what was going on and we didn't know what was about to happen. But I think we learnt really quickly that children are smart. They're very smart. They're often smarter than we give them credit for. So I think talking to children about real life and giving them the facts really helps them understand what's happening. So when something that they potentially aren't really keen on doing happens, they understand it. And so they're prepared to go forward with it because they understand why it's happening.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the last question from me, but I would like input from all five of you. How can we best approach or support an educator that we feel is struggling? So the mental health issues that come, we've sort of made out the childcare industry is very stressful, we all know that, but obviously some of those educators are dealing with the stresses. They're encountering the stress of the children, but they're bringing their own stresses in from home as well. So in terms of starting the conversation with an educator, as a lead educator or as a centre manager or as a trainer or a group manager, can I get input from each of you about what you feel is the most important first step to starting that conversation with an educator who you think might be struggling? Chris, would you like to start?
I think first we just need to normalise those conversations anyway with everybody, just making sure that everybody's connected. And that's what happens in a great workplace anyway, you can tell your colleagues. So making sure that we're always connected and using a shared language around that as well. I think that's really, really important. And the thing is, that's the problem with having like blanket wellbeing programs, is they're not tailored, they're not individual. We all have that individual needs, so we feel our needs differently, we get our needs met differently. But once you know each other, you can have those open conversations with each other. So I think it's just a natural thing that we do with one another when you are connected to people. So just making sure that the connection's really close in the workplace. Yeah, and that it's comfortable that we can do that.
And we can accept that the first connection may not work, and then we go for a second connection?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, as long as you're approachable yourself. Yeah. Okay. And again, we all speak a different sort of language to each other as well. Yeah. I don't want to keep couplifying everything, but when you have a cup language, you're not going to approach somebody who's got a small connection gap the same way you would if they've got a dominant connection gap. Yeah. So you approach them now in there. Yeah.
Okay. Joseph?
Yeah.
I use cups differently, but I often use a cup metaphor. I guess the first thing is it's not a legislative level, but at an ethos level, to identify that we accept that people have their own issues that they come with every day. They are in fact people with their own struggles at home, whether that be children or partners or finance or whatever. And so that there's an ethos of that. And then there's all of the responsibility of work in general, but then work with children specifically because they touch a certain vulnerability because they're so vulnerable, and so it just elicits that extra responsibility in us. And so I think with the ethos it would be about we care about each other, and how you demonstrate that in the workplace might be that we might meet up and for morning tea, or we might do something after work, or it might be couched as PD, but there'd be an element of it is okay to have problems. Everyone has problems. And then I guess sometimes though people don't necessarily welcome you saying something's wrong here, or I noticed you're not your chirpy self. They can get very defensive, and so it would be a case of whether that's someone in charge who might say, I've noticed a change, or whether it might be a trusted person who then has to feel able to share. But then beyond that, I guess it would be providing what support you can. You do what you can. If you can't, you get help where you can. So I think it's creating that sense of we look after each other, we value our staff, we value each other. We're better with that synergy as a whole. Mick?
Yeah, I guess the way that I look at it, I want to take some of Chris's thing. He's going well with this cup thing. So, being in safe hands, we have the Helping Hands Bank. So, it's very similar sort of process. Basically, we're asking everybody to understand that there needs to be levels of what we have in our workplace. Obviously, we look at everybody's well-being. We can put that team environment in. We can talk about, but we also need to know what the individual needs and how they like it to be responded to. I guess exactly like just said was about. You know, if you say you're not in church yourself, some people will react really differently to that. So I know if I take my team, I can only talk about the people I employ. When I'm employing them and they start with me, part of their induction's about me asking them those basic questions. Listen, if I think that you're not quite yourself, how do I approach that with you? You know, if you're not feeling yourself and you come in, who here would you talk to? Or how would you like to get that message across to us? Or, you know, what do you need to be supported with? And sometimes as employers, we really got to have those conversations and set a baseline, because sometimes you can really offend people, especially when we talk about multiculturalism and all those sort of things. We need to know what people we're dealing with before you can help them.
Alison?
In the training space, I find that many educators do come to me, and I am the ultimate professional in that regard. I don't talk about it outside that space. In terms of supporting them, I feel just being able to be very approachable, so that if they do need to unload, sometimes they just need to unload because they're either not feeling safe to do it in the workspace, or they're feeling rushed and not feeling that they've got enough time to be able to do it in the workspace. So I do make myself available if need be. I don't ever give them the answers for it because it's not my place to do so, but I am a willing ear if they need to download if need be. I find that building that good relationship with your students does actually help to support them in those behaviours.
Jade?
Yeah, lucky last, so I've got no ideas left. I think I agree with everything that everyone said. I think one of the strategies that we implemented this year was a couple, but one of them was using our social media platforms to allow our educators. We've got a fairly young workforce, so it's about tapping into what they use and what they like. And if I went out to one of my educators and said, "How are you today? Should we grab a coffee?" they'd probably start crying because, you know, the fear. But if we sent them a message on Facebook through Messenger and said, "How's everything going? Are you enjoying work? Have you got any stresses?" they'd probably unload quite comfortably. So I think using the resources and the tools that are relevant to them and giving them platforms to be able to communicate back to us with how they're feeling and resources and help and support they need, I think is probably going to be a much better way to get them to give us what they need so we can help them.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Before we finish up here, does anybody have any comments from the floor? Any questions that I've missed? Run.
Just a quick question on, you know, with the multicultural sensitivity among the educators and trainers, is that been specifically, I know that there is some way, they have a home-based childcare centres, home-based ones, and the one in the childcare centres. Is that educators all being trained well on these type of things in the mental health area?
Who would like to comment on that before I jump in? Go, Jay.
It's a great question, and I think it's something that as an industry, as a sector, we can all do a lot better in. I think we have a service here in the city that is very multicultural, so lots of families from many different backgrounds. And so what we've seen, what we've learned or what we've witnessed is that with those families coming in, attract the workers, the educators. And so that's our best tool. It's about attracting people from the same cultures and backgrounds that our families are from. So because we're not experts, and I don't believe that any training or study you can do will teach you about those cultural backgrounds as the people that are from them or in them. So we've been using our workforce, our educators, to teach us and to review our policies, procedures, our philosophy and our service to make sure that it's meeting the needs of those families. So I think there's more to be done. I think we can learn more and do more, but I think we need to tap into the people that are in it and use them to help make the change that we need.
Just following on, is that also in relation, sorry,
just following on from that, would that also be in relation to First Nations?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Trying to engage with more of our people in that mental health field.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So which is something that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
They talk a lot in the childcare space about resources, and I know for myself as an approved provider, one of my greatest resources are my staff. We have a very broadly based multicultural spread of staff. How many countries, girls, roughly? A dozen? Yeah. So one of my really big things is that we want our multicultural staff to be able to share their culture within the organisation, because that benefits the children, but it also gives them a connection from a mental health perspective to feel engaged and part of a community. So although we aren't a particular, we don't have a cultural group that is overrepresented in our centre, we use all of those teachers and we use all of those children from multicultural backgrounds to be teaching each other about all of them. And we are also extremely blessed that we have an overly active parent, grandparent, auntie, uncle, cat, dog group. So particularly for First Nations activities and lessons that we're doing with the children, we are literally swamped with families and extended members of families wanting to be involved in the centre, and we use them for food, music, culture, activity. You know, it's really fantastic, and I think although we do it for one reason, I think it has an extension on the mental. I think it has an extensional impact on the mental health as well. I'll stop talking. I'm not on the panel. Okay, so I would really like to thank all of our wonderful panellists today.
You want to take a seat as well?
I'll take
Everybody stay here for the photo. We'll give these out now.
Okay, so if you can all stay seated there. Susan and Pushpa have some awards for you. And then I'm going to hand over to a quick video, and then Pushpa will be joining us for a vote of thanks before we finish.
Thank you very much. So we're just going to get Auntie Peggy and Terry, if you could please come up. Yeah, just in behind.
Do you want me to stand up?
Or maybe if you just have them all here. No, actually, if everybody stay. Actually, maybe come down this way.
Are we staying down? I feel like I should have given up my seat.
And sorry? Terry, maybe if you could just stand down here.
Yeah, great. Good. Do you want me to stand up?
Sorry?
Were you telling me something?
You're Linda.
No, I was just asking Terry to stand up.
Yes, I am.
She's a great student.
Oh, okay. All right.
Maybe put it here. Yes.
There's room up here in the middle. As Jay said earlier, if there's no photo, it didn't happen.
Correct.
I have no idea which camera.
No, 16 years old.
Just do a sweet.
There you go, look at Shona.
Because you're all spread out so far.
Yeah.
All socially.
Panorama.
Socially distance, that's exactly right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Did we have a video, Susan?
Oh, yes, sorry, there's a video.
So we'll just play a short video first before I do the vote of thanks.
Over 400 young people lose their lives to suicide each year. This number is 400 too many. This year, the NHFA is launching the Mental mental health appeal on the 10th of October, raising funds to develop an evidence-based training program primarily aimed at promoting life and safety in young people. Join us this October in the fight against suicide. Your dollars and cents will help us prevent. Visit our website for more information on how you can support this cause. We're counting on you, Australia. Australia, are you ready for a challenge, and that too for a good cause? Then look no further. Join the Amateur Faith as we walk for mental health across the country on the 17th of October at 10:30 a.m. in each state and territory capital. Worried about COVID? Well, we've got you covered. We have launched our Amateur Faith app where you can walk virtually, raising funds as an individual or in a team. Visit our website for more information about getting started. So come on, Australia, our journey to better mental health starts with one step.
Hello everybody and thank you. So we're going to finish up the day with a vote of thanks, and I'm the leader here representing Mental Health Foundation Australia in Queensland, and so very grateful being a survivor of mental and emotional well-being. So those online and those here in presence, thank you from the bottom of our hearts, I know with our team. So I'd just like our ambassadors to stand up and give a wave, because this doesn't happen without the ambassadors. Donna, Shona, Prabhuti, and Susan. Oh my God, Susan. Thank you for giving me the opportunity of learning, serving, and supporting you as coordinator. I had no idea what goes behind the scenes, and truly been praying that she gets across that border every time. And Kiralee, thank you for the messages that, inspiring us and keeping us going. So, first of all, the wisdom and the knowledge that you've all shared, we're very, very grateful, because we know that everything you've shared with us is deep-seated within us, right? With the cups and the wisdom and everything we've gained, because after this, we can take all the knowledge that we've gained here and share that with others, and we never know whose life we're going to impact and how many lives we're going to make a difference to, because it does happen. Right now, people say smile, but that's a little difficult. So words of knowledge, wisdom, and guidance truly do make a difference, as well as your physiology and your sparkling eyes. I want to acknowledge our list. So we have Auntie Peggy. Thank you so much for coming in. We really appreciate your feedback. And of course, you're our ambassador as well. So I don't know if you put your hand up. I hope you did. Jay Fraser. Thank you for being an amazing MC and leading us through the presentations. It's been phenomenal.
You're welcome, thank you.
Terry Young, our MP, truly grateful for your intake and for being here and taking your time out and supporting MHFA in this great cause.
My pleasure.
Kelly Dixon, your award's in the post, and it's going to come to you with lots of love and virtual hugs. Christopher Phoenix, thank you so much for your intake and everything that you did, and I'm sure we're all going to be thinking about the cups that we hold in our hearts. Alison Lamb, oh my God, your beautiful energy and everything you've contributed, and for us reaching out to you as a trainer, thank you so much. We have Michael Patrick, and I had to confirm with Michael, how would you like me to call you? But I hope you like the way that it's pronounced, and thank you for your guidance and everything that you've shared with me. You're doing amazing work out there with our children. Thank you. Josie Sorban, your wealth of experience and your journey and your traveling, truly an inspirational and true role model for all of us to be living and breathing exactly what we do in the way that you do it too. And finally, Kiralee, thank you so much for everything and making this happen, and for representing Mental Health Foundation with a deep-seated heart for everything you do. Thank you. I would like to, I've already said thank you to our multicultural ambassadors, because everything happens, as a team. There is no one. We're all oneness as one team, and we make it happen here. And all our volunteers that have crewed the live streaming that's going on, Julian and the team at the back. I got his name right because we called him a number of names this morning. Our sponsors, Australian Unity and Chemist Own, And our guests, thank you so much. And just before I finish off, we have got several things at the front. So we've got the flyer for Australian Unity. Please do pick it up. It's got some really valuable knowledge there. We've got the Mental Health Foundation Australia new flyer. Really, really phenomenal and exceptional. And there's so many tools and resources in just this little thing that you can share with others. We've got the walk happening on the 17th of October, so please take a flyer. Maybe you can put it up somewhere and advertise that and share that. The calendar with everything and anything that's happening over the month. Really, really great things online and in person. Restrictions pending. And don't forget this, the most important thing, especially around suicide prevention and the youth. So any donation, even $1.50 can make a difference to the lives that we are here and representing, and having that desire in our heart to make it so happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
You did well. You did well. You looked great up there.